Hey, everybody, welcome to WP Roundtable episode 183. It took me 183 episodes before we could get Mike Schroder on the show. He's a busy guy, though, but we all understand. Thanks, Mike, for taking the time.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I kid. But Mike has been gracious, and immediately we worked out scheduling as soon as I contacted him, despite the fact that I've wanted to have you on the show for the longest time. But here we are. Finally, we get to chat at length and have it recorded.
Well, it's very kind of you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation quite a bit. And there's, I think, quite a lot that we can cover because you've been involved in a lot of different things and like really involved at a level that most other people not even close. And so we're really going to get into some cool, interesting territory around the WordPress project. And I love that. And you're just you're a good interview guy and just a good conversation kind of guy. You were just on the WordPress Weekly show a few weeks back, and that was great, really fun. I recommend people take a listen to that, and we'll try not to be too redundant today.
All right.
Before we dive into your background, Mike, this is the part of the show where each of us shares a quick pick of the week. And this is where each of us just drops something new that we think is worthy of sharing. Anything that maybe we've tried something new out, or we've discovered a new show, a new tool, app, plugin, beer. Everything's on the table here. And for me, my quick pick, I haven't thought of one yet. Actually, you caught me off guard, Mike. How could you do that? Yeah, that's not fair. But you know what is really good? Sea salt butterscotch cookies that my wife made. Great recipe. DM me and I'll get it to you. But yeah, the saltiness and the pretzels inside the cookie, somehow it's just like a magical mix. Works great. That's my quick pick of the week. You have anything special to share, Mike?
Special to share from the week. I tell you what I think made me happiest this week was there was a tweet that Morton put out earlier in the week that was share your positive WordPress story.
Right. That got a lot of responses.
Yep. And I think I always enjoy hearing about sort of how people have used WordPress and how it's changed their lives for the better. And I think if I've got a quick pick, it's that one. And happy to pull up the Twitter link so that folks that haven't seen it yet can go through and get some encouragement.
That's a good quick pick. That really is. And I love reading those too. And just that's a whole bunch in a condensed format, but just a lot of them at once. And I love it. This time of year, we do get a glimpse of a bunch of those, and that's fun stuff. And I've been hearing some of that in my podcast feed too. A few of other WordPress podcasters have been producing episodes just about their appreciation and things they're thankful for. It's just this is a fun season, It is. All right, Mike, let's learn a little bit more about you and your background, if you don't mind. We can give the short version or the long version. We'll see. We'll dig in. We'll see where the fun parts are, and just share it all. But I want to go back. Ideally, I'd like to start where you first had some vision of your future career path. Something semi-concrete where a younger Mike maybe didn't know anything about WordPress or the web or tech, maybe that much yet, but said, I think this is the path I want to walk. And what were those first steps that you took?
Well, I think it was probably a little bit before WordPress was around. I don't know that I have an exact date, sort of, but back in the, I guess, mid-90s, was when I first started messing around with sort of the internet in general and making sites and playing with what we called at that time DHTML, a little bit of dynamic HTML. I personally preferred layers over that silly CSS Internet Explorer stuff at the time. But so I still have all these pages that are just not viewable at all nowadays because, wrong technology. but I think back then was when sort of I kind of started to get interested. Yeah, something that we touched about, we talked just a little bit about earlier, you and I, right before we came online, was that I spent a few years living in Spain when I was growing up. And and during that time, I had a little bit of extra time to be able to sort of mess around on the computer, and did a lot of chatting with folks online, with people in the United States. And so I used a lot of that time to sort of learn browsers, to learn JavaScript and HTML, and kind of how things go together and work together. Mostly, silly GIF laden sites, but I'd like to think that I had at least a couple of good under construction, GIFs. So there's at least that. But no, it was really fun to create, especially dynamic stuff. I think that was kind of what I thought was most fun, was being able to use JavaScript to to provide more real-time sites, because at the time it was actually kind of out of my price range to have something CGI, or really, something that was backed by a programming language on the server,
Right.
like PHP is used now in WordPress. But so a lot of that was all done in the front end. So it's kind of like, I don't know, full circle a little bit for me personally, with
Wow.
WordPress starting to kind of move a little bit back towards the front end. But I think that was sort of the first bits of it. After that, gosh, I guess it's been a while, but slowly doing more stuff. Ended up with computer science in college, a lot due to that. And so I guess it's a little bit more of a typical career trajectory for a tech person outside of the WordPress ecosystem, at the very least, right? I might be a minority in terms of folks that are actively working on the project, and as far as that goes, when I talk to folks, because very few folks have computer science degrees. I always kind of use that as an encouragement, like, hey, no, seriously, you do not need to have this background. But
That's totally true.
Yeah.
I mean, I should know. I've interviewed a lot of people and talked to them about their background at this point, like nearly a couple hundred different people in this space, many of whom contributing actively to the project in some way. And computer science degrees are uncommon. In fact, I just, like, a couple weeks ago, did a talk about this at a WordCamp, just like sharing, like, I made a spreadsheet even with like a lot of entries, like everybody's background, so they at least professed on the show. And the backgrounds are quite varied, and the overwhelming majority of the people found WordPress to be kind of their effective gateway into these kind of technologies for the most part. But someone like yourself, you're right. Oddly enough, it is a bit of an atypical background.
I actually find it super cool that it is kind of like that WordPress is the way it is, and that it's as welcoming as it is, and that so many people get started in development or in sort of in their careers because of that. I love hearing about that, because I definitely don't feel like there needs to be some sort of tech sort of gatekeeping of any sort on around technology in general, and certainly not WordPress. So it excites me to hear the stories all the time.
It does. They're great stories. I can totally relate. It was just, WordPress was like this welcoming gateway into these deeper technologies, and never could have foreseen myself writing plugins and stuff like that. But somehow it allowed for this baby step path to getting into deeper technologies than I ever intended, and that same goes for so many of us. And maybe we'll get to it later, I suppose. But like, an ongoing discussion now is, can WordPress continue to play that role in the same way as the web continues to evolve and the needs of the platform become more advanced? Can WordPress still be this welcoming gateway for beginners without the advanced skill set? What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly hope so. I know that for me, at the very least, WordPress has been the gateway for other technologies, right? So I would not have probably messed with React had it not been for WordPress. I wouldn't have taken, like, gone to talks, or gone to learning sessions from folks from the WordPress community about it. I wouldn't have written React code. And I think that Gutenberg is exciting, or really, what will be the block editor soon, in terms of also providing APIs that make it easier to try that for the first time. You don't have to build the interface that is Gutenberg, right? Because I did a course a little while back from Wes Bos down. I think it was in during the Day of Rest in Boston, and a lot of times those are more focused on, in general, you don't know how to make a thing from scratch. And it was super helpful, and I learned so much. But at the same time, that's not really enough to make something, in just one session, or how a short amount of something is not enough to sit down and, okay, I'm going to build a new thing.
Right.
And necessarily feel super confident around it. Whereas I feel like the tool set that is being provided by Gutenberg in terms of APIs and such is strong enough that it requires a very small amount of code to make a pretty big interface change. And so I hope that WordPress sort of that the becoming more advanced doesn't need to mean it's not as welcoming. That instead it can kind of mean, oh, hey, so folks who have this background already, sure, hey, we're doing that too. Come join. But also, you have this other background, you know a little bit, more about PHP and development there. Oh, hey, you want to come learn about this JavaScript thing too?
Right.
And so I really hope that it can sort of continue to be that. I've just been talking with a friend recently, going through a coding boot camp to also try and switch industries and move into the space. And what they're focusing on there is it's all JavaScript. I mean, that's what's sort of that's what's being taught, as even in those sort of more formalized, you're sitting down and learning something in a classroom situations. That's what they're teaching. And so being able to connect with folks who that is their knowledge, that is their current knowledge, I think is powerful too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a little bit of a winding way to answer that, but yes, is the answer, like it. Really? Yes.
Yeah. I think it can. And I'm optimistic with you. Yeah. It seems that it's a real challenge to acknowledge that as we advance and the level of sophistication that is required for the demands of the modern web increase, like, we must be aware of this. Totally. But absolutely, I'm with you. I'm also optimistic that we can, come through this somehow and still be welcoming, and perhaps even more welcoming, and inviting to maybe beginners with like a different set of beginner level skill set and from other communities than ever before. Yeah. Well, thanks for your commentary on that.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to your background, like the evolution of your career a little bit, you got the computer science degree.
Yeah.
Did you ever like freelance or anything and make websites for people?
Yeah. So I guess starting back in sort of the late 90s, I think I made my first site for somebody else. At that point, I wasn't getting money for it. It was just like, hey, there's this kid that,
right.
that does websites, or that knows how to do this thing. And so I worked on one back then, but I started doing freelancing back in the States, sort of. So during college, I made some sites for folks. I did a little bit of sysadmining too. So I was a combination, I guess, Windows, Linux sysadmin for a couple of different places. I guess a little bit before then too. In high school, I did a little bit of that, and then in college, worked for a durable medical equipment place and learned more than I ever thought I would learn about medical billing and stuff like that while I was doing that. Yeah. So, little things from here and there, I suppose. And then moved into my first sites, I think, that I made for folks that were dynamic weren't WordPress. They were some Joomla. I did a little bit of OS commerce. Yeah,
Oh,
anyone who
cool.
did those,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean. You know how excited I am right now. But a couple of Magento sites. So that kind of came first. Dreamweaver, did some Dreamweaver sites that were not so dynamic, but super cool
Very
with
cool.
templating, so
Mhm.
that users could go back and edit them easily afterward. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
DWT. Right.
yeah.
Yep.
So I did a little bit of that. My first connection with WordPress came around that same time, I guess. Really, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. Probably around 12. Was it 12 years or so? Ish. Yeah, it sounds about right. When I made not a site for somebody else, but a site for myself. So my first, playing with it and trying to get WordPress to do something was for a personal site. I was setting up this account with a host someone just had introduced me to in college called DreamHost, and I had initially started an account there so I could use Subversion and stuff like that for classes because
Right.
I wanted to be able to have a place to share code. And that happened to be the one sort of the CMS at the top of the list for one clicks. And I was like, hey, why not? Let's kind of see what happens. And so I remember doing it. I remember it was easy to get installed. I remember it looked okay pretty quickly, but that I believe I had to go and manually edit my theme to not have comments. So that was cool. So that was sort of my first, I guess, coding experience in WordPress. Was, hey,
That's great.
was trying to figure out how to remove the comment form.
Yep.
And then I guess so that was the beginning. And from there, I think I helped a couple. I'm trying to remember exactly how many sites I messed with for other folks between then and DreamHost, but I don't know if you want to hear do you want to hear more life stories? Should I keep going with this? You want to talk about other stuff? I can do it.
We've got a lot of time and we can bounce around a lot, so like, yeah, hit us with some client stories. I want to know like what how long was it, first of all? How long were you just building websites?
I mean, like, so it was kind of a mixture of whatever people wanted. It was kind of where I was at that point. I wasn't like, I mean, I know folks that have sort of more established, client lists and well, maybe not client lists, but that feel more like a company. This was basically just me, and if I needed someone else to help out with stuff, I would do it too. And at this point, it was, I didn't have a lot of money, so I was just kind of working with whatever clients I could find, doing whatever stuff they needed done. So that's why it was kind of such a huge mix of technologies. I also ended up building a couple things for someone in Flash. I ended up building
Of course.
I think it was a training DVD for folks in Flash. So it wasn't actually Flash then. It was whatever the Macromedia product was, so that you could like turn it into an executable. I can't remember anymore.
Yeah.
What it was. So I did that. I did some DVDs for so actually, going and recording video or taking together video and processing it and doing editing and then turning it into something more digital. A little bit of that. I guess what were my big projects there? Oh yeah, there was some training for a corrugated box company that was actually pretty cool. I learned so much about how to sort of build and make boxes. And I also did this deer processing video. So I learned more than I thought I would ever know about processing deer. So that was a thing. That was a learning experience.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't. As far as it was nothing super high profile, but certainly interesting for me, and I learned a lot of stuff. And of course, about little by little about working with folks and what people need and what people look for in insights and
Sure.
what people look for in products and what's actually going to make them successful, how to negotiate what that is, how to make mistakes on, oops, yeah, that wasn't the right way to communicate this thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't do that thing again. um, you know,
That's a lot of stuff. I mean, like, what didn't you use for real?
what didn't I use? That's a good question. I didn't build anything in Cold Fusion.
Oh, well, okay. You didn't miss anything.
I don't think, I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure I built anything in front page. I did edits for folks that used front page, but I don't
Sure.
think I ever built anything for anyone that used front page. I didn't use, let's see, for a client project, I never used Perl. I ended up using Perl uh, a bit later and a lot earlier because it was the only thing, you know, like if you wanted to build something and you started around that time period and it needed to be fully featured for the web, like, I don't know, there weren't a lot of options.
Sure.
Um,
Oh,
but yeah, yeah.
that's a lot of stuff. I mean, that's crazy to just think about being able to expose yourself to that many different things. Like that's, I mean, you're just like so well versed in everything that preceded this modern era of the web, like all those fun tools, all those platforms, all those things that many of which are dead and gone now.
Oh, yes.
Most of which are not really missed by anybody, but still, like you had this opportunity, which a part of me thinks like that's so cool. That's enviable to have had that kind of varied experience. Do you think that that kind of experience would be like really, I don't know, somehow to be encouraged for other people getting started, somehow to, I don't know, dip your toes in like every pond out there?
I don't know. I don't know if I would like recommend going and like trying everything. For me, it certainly wasn't a choice, right? It was, hey, I need to make some money to live. So how, you know, where can that come from? Or what people do I know that need something? And I think that definitely helps. I mean, I think if you're just getting started and you're trying to sort of move your career in that direction, it's not a bad idea to take to take jobs or to take things that are on the edge of your knowledge. I wouldn't suggest to like, you know, go do and you know, accept a job for something that you know absolutely nothing about. But sometimes I'll talk with folks and they're like, well, I don't know about this thing very much that is sort of tangentially related or very closely related. But, you know, like maybe you're making a site for the first time for someone that where they need just a little bit of e-commerce stuff, you know, added on. They want to sell a couple files or whatever, and you haven't made a site where you sell files online before. Well, maybe you take a look and you think, well, okay, what would it take? What would it really take to do it? What should I charge? How can I build it into my rates? You know, or assume extra time for myself that I'm going to take to learn a thing, and try and learn that thing. And I mean, I think it takes a bit of time to figure out sort of exactly where those boundaries are. But and certainly, you know, it means in those cases, I didn't get paid for all my hours. I spent a lot of hours working on, you know, learning those things and to be able to do it. You know, I didn't already know how to create a, you know, an interactive training video for the company,
Yeah.
but I knew folks that could record things on video cameras. I knew that, you know, who to talk to figure out how to just get started in terms of like, you know, video editing, and who to ask for, you know, for pointers there. Um, and I knew enough, a little bit about each of the technologies, enough to get started. And I guess that also leads to, don't be afraid to ask folks for help, and to ask for other people to help you with bits too. It might be that you're working with a client and you've been working with them for a while. They have a new need that you didn't anticipate, that is a thing that you don't know how to do, or you don't feel like you know how to do well yet.
Yeah.
Maybe that means reaching out to someone in the field that knows about that and saying, hey, you know, do you have extra time to, you know, can I give you some hours for this to come in and work on this? Are you interested in this work? Maybe it's a time that you can also help others that are trying to find work. There are all sorts of ways that you can kind of build, I don't know, build that into getting started. And I think that for me at least was something that was valuable. All the tools aren't necessarily, but in terms of both being willing to try new things, and in terms of, I don't know, I guess I hope that I never forget entirely what that was like.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it requires reminders.
Yeah.
But I hope I never entirely forget what it was like to just have to find whatever projects I could to get by, because I think that is really, really important.
Yeah. You touch on something that it like reminds me of a point that I make often and is important to me, and that's this confidence in yourself to be able to learn something if you need to.
Yeah.
And you know, I've recognized that at certain points in my career, I had mental barriers put in places because I thought that's not me. That's not something I could learn. I'm not
Sure.
capable of doing that. So I'm going to steer in the direction I think I am. But not realizing that I was erecting those artificial barriers, preventing me from, you know, going in another direction and learning something. And I've witnessed this in a lot of other people too, just writing off entire technologies and skill sets, thinking it's not for them. And it seems incredibly valuable to develop this sense of, you know, the ability to learn anything if you need to. And it sounds like you were able to develop that yourself. This willingness to try anything, and building this confidence to the point where you know, it's just another platform. I can figure it out. There's nothing going to be so sophisticated about this one that I can't figure it out. I figured out all the others. So were you able to, do you think you were really able to like developing that in a special way?
I think that it is definitely the case that I was privileged to be able to spend the time to do so. It's still like, I think that it still takes me some of, pushing myself a little bit when it's something entirely new. But I definitely do think that after you've done it a few times, tried out a new technology, tried out a new skill that maybe you hadn't, played with too much before, I do think that it helps in terms of developing a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It is probably the case that I wouldn't feel as excited about React or about the changing in WordPress and that sort of thing if it weren't for previous experiences in terms of shifting, even minor shifts, right? And in terms of skills.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely do think that has, to use the figure of speech of the snowball effect, but something kind of like that, where if after you've done it a couple of times, it helps. But I definitely recognize that it's not something that is easy for everyone. It's intimidating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. A lot of the other things we talk about make me think of another question, kind of more or less, that I like getting from people when we talk
Sure.
about the winding road that took them to where they are.
Yeah.
And it's the balance between like being driven towards a specific objective
Yeah.
and responding to the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah.
And how do you assess yourself when you look back and say, like, was the kind of person who said, like, this is where I want to end up, what does it take for me to get there, and do that? Or these are the opportunities that come in my way, and I'm gonna take what I can get and just see where I end up, or somewhere in between. And do you think back favorably on how you balanced those two opposites?
I don't know. I think there was a long period of time where I thought I would end up working on tech stuff, and so I guess in that light, there was some amount of continuing to follow that path. But I definitely think that in terms of my career, at least, it has been formed a lot more by. I definitely think I've been. I don't know the word to use. Privileged, blessed, to be able to have opportunities, and not just opportunities, but really friends around me,
Mm.
and people that I knew around me that were willing to that were willing to kind of, reach out a hand and say, hey, there's this thing,
Yeah.
And I think if anything, I think it's a lot more surrounding those things than any sort of like personal, drive for, oh yeah, someday I am going to be doing this. What set of someday I'm going to be a WordPress developer or a developer of open source, whatever. What are the exact steps I can do to get there? Now, I never imagined that I'd have the opportunity to do what I do now. I mean, I might have dreamed, but I never imagined. I didn't think it was going to be a thing. And certainly it wasn't a direct path. Like a lot of the stuff I've said so far was kind of, well, I guess there has been a lot of technology around the way. It hasn't always been tech, but a lot of it, there's been a lot of tech. Besides that, yeah, I think it's been a lot more about people than it has a lot more about people and relationships than it has been about myself and saying I'm going to go. I respect that quality in others when I see it. Like I have a lot of people that I admire, and I'm including like folks outside of tech, outside of the ecosystem that just put in such a heavy amount of work to arrive at their dreams and are super driven and like this. But I think that's less what's happened in terms of my career.
Sure. Yeah. I love it though. I love it. The role that people play, it can't be understated for so many of us. Like I don't know what would have happened had I not discovered this community of people. Like the local guy here who just so happened to be starting a WordPress meetup at the time I had big problems, I needed help. And he was like, you need custom post types. You need this plugin.
Yeah.
It can't be understated. Speaking of dream, hosting came next for you. So
kind of. It did to some extent, but yeah, kind of. I guess just because I feel like this makes for this. I don't know, because I like to tell this story. I'll tell the story. After college, I did not immediately move into tech stuff. My brother is a sort of writer director type person, and so initially, after college, I got in a minivan with Elizabeth, my wife, and my brother, and we literally put whatever we could fit in the van and drove across the country to LA.
Wow, where were you from?
Well, from is a tricky question.
Okay.
I grew up in a few states around the United States. I guess mainly Texas, Pennsylvania, Michigan. The drive was from Michigan.
Okay, cool. Then, which is where I'm at now.
That's cool. Yeah. I was in Ann Arbor, so that's where I went to school in Ann Arbor. So that's where I was for several years. So it was between those states and in Spain for a few years. It was kind of my upbringing. And then we drove across the United States with what we could fit and enough money for like first month of rent plus a month. And
wow.
Basically the stereotypes that you can kind of think of around that. And so spent our first few months. Elizabeth is a teacher, and so she was able to find a job teaching pretty quickly, which is awesome. And I have a huge amount of respect for her and everything she does. And my brother and I got whatever work we could in the film industry. So you'll find me around in background work in random shows from I guess around 2010. Around 2010, if you watch TV, you'll probably see me somewhere.
Wow.
So I did that for a few months and kind of just made money wherever we could around that ecosystem. Did a little bit with my brother. That was super exciting. And then I was looking for a little bit more steady money, and had noticed that company that had gotten suggested to me back in college for Subversion hosting happened to be based in Los Angeles. And so I took a look, and I ended up applying for like what I thought would probably be a short-term job in tech support. And so I ended up working in tech support over there. And my manager was this guy by the name of Jason Cosper, who probably some listeners
of course
are familiar with. He's over at Liquid Web now, and yeah, WP Engine for a long time. But yeah, and so he gave me the opportunity to basically to move progressively into more advanced tickets and helping out with tech support. So I ended up getting pretty deep in the WordPress weeds in terms of troubleshooting. I did tech support, primarily WordPress, along with migrations and all that kind of stuff, for about 2 years with DreamHost.
Wow.
And then they opened up this position for a developer working on WordPress stuff inside DreamHost, and with an element of contribution. And I was like, hey, pick me, and was given the opportunity to really the privilege to spend time getting more connected, because at that point I still wasn't very connected with the WordPress community, really. I had gotten gradually more connected while I was doing that work, but in tech support. But as far as like core development and stuff like that, I knew basically nothing. I ended up sending an intro email to the WP hackers list at the time.
Right.
And I remember that that Jen and Ryan McHugh were the first welcomes that came back in.
Wow.
And, folks were super welcoming. And it was neat. It took me a super long time to sort of get well connected and be able to regularly work on stuff. I still remember how hard it was to find tickets, to find stuff to work on. Some of that's changed now. Some of it's exactly the same. But yeah, so they gave me the opportunity to do that, and I was at DreamHost in total for just under 9 years. So
wow.
A couple of years in tech support. I spent a couple years sort of in that position. I guess the long story short, at the end, I was the director of WordPress strategy over there, and was spending about half of my time on community-related things, whether it be hosting community or development, or whether it be WordCamps and stuff like that, and about half on strategy and helping to sort of define product.
Okay.
So stuff like that.
And now, like, you recently made a change. So I guess.
Yes, I did.
At no point in this conversation have we even said what you do now.
Yeah.
That's not something I'm good at. Maybe I assume everybody tuning in just should know this already.
Yeah.
But so let's do the what do you do now thing.
What do I do now? As of, I can't remember the exact date that it was, I guess the beginning of October, I started in a full-time contribution gig over at GoDaddy. So I'm super excited about this still. It's kind of hard to believe day to day, but they're donating my time to work on the WordPress project, and really in whatever way that I think is going to be most effective. And it's really a lot of freedom. And so I've still been kind of figuring out where I'm spending all the rest of that time. So far, it's been mainly on Gutenberg related things, and events. So speaking and stuff like that. But we'll just kind of see where that goes. But I'm super stoked to have the opportunity, and that especially that GoDaddy is as invested in not just in the WordPress ecosystem, but really in open source in general. One thing that I didn't know before I joined was that they have a whole set of folks that they donate time. I think some full time and some not, for open source, but to a whole set of open source projects that
Wow.
they have a working group internally for that sort of thing and for folks working on open source. And I didn't realize that there was this big of a focus until I started to sort of interview over there and learn a little bit about the work that's being done. But I've joined Aaron Campbell over there, who was their first, as far as I'm aware, their first full-time WordPress hire. He's also fully sponsored to work on WordPress related things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool to be in a team that's focused on doing that. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It's pretty cool. It was pretty cool news to hear last month. You're making that change and getting to go full time. There was a lot of plenty of congratulations and support from the community. Everybody agrees, like, well deserved. But this is an interesting time to kind of go full time into WordPress. I think, like, it's because WordPress, like, it kind of had a rhythm, you know, like a sequence. Like, you were very involved, and it was year after year iterations and this formula, and you just had to come in and learn the system. And you know what? This year we threw that system out, and it's a little different now. So that's interesting. And, like, how's your adjustment been?
I'm still figuring it out. I'm still adjusting is really the answer. I think it must have was either the week that I started or the week after that I started at GoDaddy that the Gutenberg release schedule was announced. So I was just kind of like, oh, I had an idea about what I was going to do and the things I was, kind of what it was going to look like. And now I don't really know. I'm not sure. I still don't know exactly. I think still in progress is really the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
I kind of, what I've been attempting to do is to, I guess, contribute in the parts where I might be able to contribute that might bring other information to the table. So
sure.
So when it comes to Gutenberg tickets that I do have enough background to be able to help out with, I've been doing that, and slowly learning how Gutenberg works and how to develop for it, getting set up with that. I think my first Gutenberg ticket was, I've only done a few, but like actual code ending up in that sort of a thing rather than just feedback. But that was around the end of the year, and then was the first one was like the end of last year. So I guess almost a year ago now. And then trying to provide feedback from sort of the hosting point of view. So I spend a decent amount of time in the hosting community team. I'm one of the team reps over there. And kind of the idea there is for hosts to be able to come together and for other folks to be able to come together with hosts too, and sort of help WordPress move forward in that way. So whether it be hosts being aware of what's going on, whether it be plugin developers connecting with hosts so that we can have smooth rollouts, whether it be documentation. So like Andrew Taylor has done a lot of work from Pantheon, has done a lot of work heading up a documentation project to actually document what's necessary to run WordPress, which hadn't been done before. There was no list of PHP extensions and modules that WordPress uses until about a year ago, just under a year ago.
Great.
So stuff like that, where a lot of hosts kind of know this stuff intuitively, but it's not something that's really talked about a whole lot of it, especially there isn't official documentation for. And I feel like that's something that should be open source too. I feel like anyone should be able to come into the WordPress space and set up their own server or their own, whether it be an actual physical machine whether it be bare metal or whether it be something on AWS or whatever it is, right? To be able to spin it up and know, well, how do I run WordPress well? I haven't used WordPress before, but a client just asked me to do it. What do I do? Yeah, anyway, I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but being able to offer information about, hey, what are the things that might be related to Gutenberg or affect Gutenberg that are related to hosting or that are related to the other area where I have worked on stuff, at least during the past few years especially, is in terms of media. And so, what things might folks run into, what backwards compatibility is most important to provide, that sort of stuff. And I don't know that I haven't done a perfect job with it, for sure. But trying to do that as well as I can with the amount of time that there's been, really has been kind of so far. And I hope that as sort of, Gutenberg moves forward and the community goes forward, it, can just keep learning, I suppose.
Of course, no doubt.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Sure. Well, at the end, so I'm curious. At the end of the day, you ultimately accountable to just yourself for choosing where to focus or where you think it's most important to work, or like to what degree are you like seeking out something that's interesting to you, or getting direction from others on where you might be spending your time well?
Sure. So I think that at least up until this point, and I expect this to really continue to be the case unless it's clear that I'm not getting stuff done. GoDaddy is not at least a party that is deciding that. So it's so as far as that goes, it's up to me and sort of what I decide to work on. I try not to make those decisions in a vacuum. So what I did at the beginning, especially of the Gutenberg cycle, was to sort of reach out to folks and chat with folks about what might be helpful for the project, because unlike a lot of most contributors to WordPress are volunteers and do it on their own time. And for that, I'm super, super grateful, because I'm not in that position and can actually, assign hours for things and decide, what's going to get done, or that, because I have more to play with there. I like to connect with folks and be like, hey, I know that you're leading this thing. Where can I actually be of help? What would actually be helpful? And so I did some chatting a bit with both, with various folks in project leadership. So like initially with Matt and with in short conversation about, sort of focusing around Gutenberg, and also with other folks in the Gutenberg project, with some people that are like with Anthony, who's heading up media for Gutenberg. Hey, what help could you use there? So yes, I get to decide those things, and I do certainly gravitate towards things that are interesting, but at the same time, I also like to try and pick things that are related to real needs, and try to pick things that'll have an impact.
Have you had specialties in core before? Like, I maybe should know this, I don't know, but have there been like areas of focus where you spent most of your time?
It ended up, so at the beginning it was pretty random, and I just did a few different features that had to do with, like, let's see, I think the first sort of project that I did was with Helen. We were doing some work on the plugins, I believe. No, the themes. Now I'm spacing on it. I think it was the themes page. We were trying to get some improvements in there, and then I did some work with Oz a little bit on the Heartbeat API, and sort of building in post locking, that sort of stuff. Eventually, so the first really big project that sort of set that specialty direction, I suppose. I worked with Marco Heinen on refactoring the image generation code in Core.
Right.
So there'd been an open ticket that Matt had opened. I don't even remember what the number was at this stage. I probably should. I'm sure if Nason watches this, he'll like give the number out loud as I'm talking. But that had been open for years and years and years, around making it so that ImageMagick could be used to generate images. And the trouble had been that everything in Core was so centered around GD that you just couldn't use anything else. And so we did some work to sort of refactor things so that you could use any image backend that you wanted, and provided Core with initial implementations for both GD and ImageMagick.
Wow.
And I think there's one for Graphics Magic that Marco wrote too, but essentially those first couple. And so that was sort of the project that sent me down the media rabbit hole. That I don't know how long I'll be in that rabbit hole, but maybe it'll be forever, maybe it'll be for whatever. But that's what set me on that, in that direction. And so I'm one of the maintainers for media alongside several other amazing folks. And yeah, so when it comes to Core stuff, that is, I think that's the closest to a sort of specialty that I have.
Are there other like areas of focus which you hope a time will come that you get to dive into, but just respecting that it's not a priority right now, but I can't wait till the time comes and I can dig in here or there?
That's interesting. I don't know if there's anything that, a complete change of focus that I really wish that I could take. I would love, though, to do more work in React related to media. Like that would be super exciting.
Right.
At some point, I would love to see the team, and I would love to be included in this, to see the team dig into what the media library would look like, ideally, inside in a Gutenberg world. Because I think it would make it a lot easier for, well, both. I think we can simplify the flows a lot, and I know Tammy has talked a lot about that as well. I think we can simplify the flows a lot, and I think that we can come up with something that's more easily extensible for developers. I think it's time. I don't know that it'll happen right away because because there's a lot more work to be done in Gutenberg around other already planned focuses, but that would be really exciting to work more with React and to work with a team of people putting something like that together. I think that would be really fun.
You have talked about how this is kind of a change of topic, so sorry, but you've talked. It's not that far. You've talked a little bit about how welcoming people were when you started contributing.
Yeah,
I've had similar experiences and heard very similar stories over and over again.
Yeah.
At the same time, I've also heard stories where things didn't go so well.
Yeah.
Where someone maybe had good intentions or not, but maybe wanted to chip in. Maybe was told, like, if you care so much, help out. That's anything like that. And they don't rate their experience very highly, and as a result, maybe not that interested in participating actively anymore. It's inevitable with a project of this size that those stories are going to come up. And I heard a lot of those stories even recently with the project going through so many structural changes and just how the release cycles go and who's involved in the project and and who they're employed by, and all these things are coming up in conversations. And so now maybe you have a message for somebody who is discerning, like it looks, I'd like to get involved, I'd like to participate, but I'm cautious because of these stories. What would you say to somebody like that?
That's a really good question. First, absolutely yes. Not everyone has a positive experience. I mean, I I've certainly had experiences where I thought that code was the right thing for core, and it also hasn't made it in. Um, those situations where it's sort of a project decision, um, I tend to put those are harder. Those are sort of the hardest, I think, to answer, because I kind of feel like in an open source world of in an open source project of any nature, there are some contributions that will end up in the project and some that won't.
Mhm.
And that's a tough one. Um, I think, yeah, this is a hard question to answer. Yes, you may have a positive or a negative experience. I think at the moment, because of the velocity of things, especially, it's particularly hard to get involved in terms of Gutenberg. Um, I hope that that won't be the case afterward. And I think that, I guess it depends on who we're talking to, right? If you're someone that's never contributed to WordPress before, I actually think this is a really good time, because the easiest way to get involved is with testing. And so sort of it's being able, there's a lot of help needed to go through and to, sort of download patches or test pull requests to make changes to those, and refresh those patches or pull requests, to make, to make little changes of those to sort of slowly move toward getting there. And so if you're interested in contributing and you haven't done it before, I think that that's a really good way to get involved, and there's a huge need for it at the moment. So that would be a piece of encouragement that I'd give. If you have been involved before and you've gotten burned, I think the feedback is going to be different depending on who the person is. Like, I would say, first, the way that you feel is legitimate. What happened to you happened to you.
Mm.
And I wish that it weren't that way. I wish that work were always appreciated in the project, no matter what it is, and no matter whether it made it in. I wish that were always the case, and I want that to be the way that WordPress functions. If there's ever anything that I can do to change the way that is, I will do my utmost. And if there's anything that I can do to help those situations or to help those relationships, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'm more than happy to chat with you about it. And either keep it between us or to chat with other folks if I can be helpful. And if you make the decision not to do stuff with WordPress anymore, I respect that. I think it's important for folks to protect themselves and to protect their where they are, mentally. I think that self-care is really important. And if that's where you are, then that's where you are. Mm-hmm. And but if you want to be able to be involved more, I'm more than happy to help, and to help with any relationships that are involved if it's within my power, or for as much as it is within my power.
I'm not one who maybe would or should know, but from what the stories that I've heard, the retelling of success stories, if you will, of people who managed to get involved, and found themselves continuing to do so, and finding fulfillment in the process, and people on the other hand who made attempts, didn't enjoy the experience, and stopped. Those relationships, I think, are a common factor, where those who maybe worked with someone who was effectively a mentor, guiding them in the right direction, giving some advice, welcoming them personally, and helping them, like, apply their skills productively.
Sure.
Versus someone kind of coming in blind on the outside and, like dropping a patch out of the blue, or opening a ticket, sure, just suddenly, or jumping into a core chat. Sometimes those have been the occasions where experiences were, maybe not as they had hoped. And
Right.
it seems like those relationships, like would you recommend the best path would be to maybe connect individually with someone who might be able to guide you through the process as opposed to jumping into the pond and trying to swim with all that breaks down. But anyway, you get the question.
Yeah. I definitely think that asking for help is a thing that is important. And one of the first things that helped me out was I know that Nason reached out to me pretty early and was like, "Hey, when you have questions, you should just message me because that's my job is to help with those things." And I am not Nason, but it is part of my job to help with those things. So definitely feel free to reach out to me. It's like that's what I'm here for, is to help. And so if I can be helpful, definitely please do. No matter who you are, if you don't know me, that's okay. If we've never chatted or if we've chatted a bunch of times, it's fine. Another thing that you can do is there are these new contributor meetings that are getting run in the WordPress Slack.
I didn't know about
And
those.
yeah, let me find the exact time for it. If they're every other week, right before the weekly chat. So if you don't already know, the WordPress project has a Slack channel that is free for anyone to join. Anyone is welcome to come join. There's a channel called Core, where basically where chat around core development happens. In that channel, there is both a weekly chat on Wednesdays, and there is also every 2 weeks there's a new contributor chat. It is, let's see, it looks like it is currently scheduled for this week. I don't know if it's still happening this week just because of what's going on with Gutenberg. I would have to check into the folks that are running it, but every 2 weeks you can go in an hour before the chat. You can hang out. There are folks that are there that have been working in WordPress for way longer than me, that can answer questions for you, and you can bring up tickets if you're having trouble getting involved, or if you feel like you've hit roadblocks and just nobody's paying attention. Hey, hello, come on, I did this work. and so that's a really good place to go, and I'm really excited that those meetings are going on. I can, in whichever way you would prefer. I guess I'll just say it out loud. There is the place to go to find out when all the meetings are, all the times where you can go and listen to folks. Even if you don't participate, it's totally fine to show up and lurk and listen and learn. make.wordpress.org/meetings. You can go there. You can see all the meetings. There are a ton. One of those is the new core contributors chat, and you can see it listed there, where it is and what channel it's in, or where it is, when it is.
That is really cool. I didn't know about the new contributors meeting. Very cool. Well, thanks, Mike. Our time is running short. I'm going to hit you with a couple wrap-up questions.
Okay, sure.
All right. What's on your schedule? When are people going to bump into you in person in the next few months?
I think the only event that I have sort of on the list right now is WordCamp US. If you're at WordCamp US, I'll be around for the whole event and also at Contributor Day. So feel free to come say, hey, I would love to chat.
Right on.
If you see me hanging out in the hallway, if you see me talking with people, that doesn't mean you can't come talk to me. Please do it. Please feel free to come over and say hi anyway. I would love to meet you. And just because I'm having a conversation doesn't mean you're not welcome to either say hi or to join and to chat too. They're not like, every once in a while I hear people tell me that, oh, well, I saw you having a serious conversation. No. Come join us. Join the conversation. That's how most people get involved, and you are welcome to be included. And so please come say hi, and I hope to see you. And if not, I'm in WordPress Slack. I am Mike. I'm at Mike in the WordPress Slack, and I'm at GetSource on Twitter. So feel free to message me on either of those.
Very cool, man. Thank you. Do you have any recommendations for people that I should have on the show in the future?
That is a good question. And that is a tough one because I know that you have had a lot of folks on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And so I don't know if I'm gonna, if the folks I would be thinking about
There's
are
no
people that
penalty.
you've
There's no
already.
penalty.
Okay. Have you already had Mayo on the show?
No.
Okay, I would recommend Mayo for sure from the from Tokyo, from the WordPress community there. She's one of the organizers. She's
Awesome.
amazing. So that yeah, I think she would be great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the great recommendation, and thanks for the awesome conversation, man. This has been really fun, and I can't wait to bump into you in Nashville in like 10, 11 days, something.
Yeah, super soon.
It's so fast. In fact, I have to turn in my final draft of my slides tonight because last day. Get to practicing because, that's a big stage. 2 tracks this year. Only 2 tracks, not the 3. So maybe there will be somebody in my room at that point. But anyway, can't wait to see you in Nashville. It's coming up. And thanks for joining me today. It's been fun.
Look forward to seeing you too, and thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, congrats on the new gig, and thanks for all you do to contribute and make this awesome project better.
Well, thank you, and thanks everyone else. Thanks all of the, really at this point, I don't know the exact number. I think thousands of volunteers. So thank you so much, and thank you for using WordPress.
Right on. Yeah, the season of thanks, man.